Hi there, folks. Yeah, thanks for coming and looking at our sort of presentation on a roundup of what came out of .conf just about a month ago. Obviously, there it was over in Las Vegas. They're already advertising next year's one in the same location. So what I want to do basically is run through what were the main themes that came out of .conf this year, last month, sorry. So myself and a few others from Somerford, we went over, we attended obviously the keynotes and various different technical talks throughout. The thing that I would definitely say that's definitely worthwhile some of your time when you can find that time, obviously I know we're all quite busy, is if you can go to this URL here. This is the sort of keynotes online. When you get time, have a look and watch and sort of view these videos here. The first one, so day one keynote, is very much high level strategic, which way is Splunk as a company moving, versus day two, which is much more on, and here are the new products and here are the new things and how they work and how you implement them and what value they bring to you. From day one, one of the interesting things that we see this year is the data to everything platform, as you see on the slide there. So data to everything is basically the idea that Splunk is now going to move as a platform beyond where it has traditionally lay, i.e. Looking at IT ops, looking at security, managing a SOC, that sort of thing, into various other different silos within a business. So, for example, within your HR department, looking at using, for example, machine learning with HR data to predict which employees are likely to switch and go and work for a competitor, for example, or to predict at which point you really must recruit more than X number of employees to fill a skills shortage, those sorts of things, in order to basically move from that traditional siloed operation within IT ops and security and move right out into all aspects of all businesses. So there is some interesting examples that they give of this in the day one keynote. And then, as I said, the day two keynote traditionally has always been the one where you see the demonstrations of new technology. So there are a couple of things from this year mentioned at .conf, which were previously mentioned last year when .conf was over in Florida. Those are technologies that were brand new to Splunk last year in a very early alpha, sort of beta status, being tested amongst a set of limited customers and so on. They, for the majority of those, they have now moved into sort of limited release and or general availability. So some of those were re-mentioned this year, and I'll go through some of those as we proceed through this sort of demonstration. One other thing, I'm sure many of you are probably aware of this, so if I'm telling you things you already know, then I do apologize. But if you weren't able to attend Conf, the great thing that Splunk do is they put nearly all of the talks from .conf online, and they go back 3 years. So you've got this year, last year, and the year before. And what you can do, you can put in, your skill level, your role. You can actually say, I'm only interested in ITSI, for example, and it will give you only those talks relevant to ITSI. You can also put in your search terms here as well. So, for example, some of the stuff I've been doing today with other customers is about machine learning. So we can say, I want to know what talks have been given about machine learning. So you can go and watch the video. So if I clicked here, you'll see this new tab opens up.
We are super excited to have.
I'll stop that right there because it's a bit interference. But the talk, as it was given, is there ready to watch. So there are plenty of amazing resources, basically, if you missed .conf, to catch up on what was actually brought out, what was new, what was interesting. So talking sort of in a wider context then, looking at these things here being what was effectively mentioned in the keynotes. So the big one, obviously, Splunk Enterprise 8.0 was released. 8.0 is a sort of brand new version. The interesting thing from my perspective, when it comes to maturity of Splunk as a sort of core product, 7.2 had a couple of issues. There was some stability. There was a few other issues with 7.2 series of releases. And the great thing that Splunk did was basically take that on board. And with 7.3, the testing that was done was considerably greater than was done on 7.2. And with 8.0, it was doubly so. 8.0 promises to be a much more stable release and much more reliable release than any other previous release. In addition, so moving down the list here, so Machine Learning Toolkit 5.0 was released. Again, 5.0 is only compatible with Splunk 8.0. So if you currently have Machine Learning Toolkit in your environment and you're running, say, Splunk 7.2, 7.3, something like that, you won't yet be able to use Machine Learning Toolkit 5.0. And one of the reasons for that is that with Machine Learning Toolkit 5 and also Splunk Enterprise 8.0, there is a shift and a migration towards using Python 3 rather than Python 2. As many of you know, I'm sure, Python 2 goes end of life on New Year's Eve. And so there is this big pressure within IT industries, globally, I would say, to move any sort of legacy code from Python 2 to Python 3. So yes, as I said, Enterprise 8 and Machine Learning Toolkit 5, both very much with one foot in Python 3. So Splunk Enterprise 8 at the moment runs Python 2 and Python 3 in parallel. There is obviously a plan in future to be purely a Python 3 base. One thing to be aware of, if you have upgrades in mind and you want to continue to upgrade in order to remain within the sort of support window that Splunk provides, is that your technology add-ons, so most customers will have the Windows technology add-on or the Linux technology add-on. Those things will be those two in particular are Splunk owned, and therefore they will be upgraded and they will support the new Python 3 and so on. Whereas if you have a third-party technology add-on that perhaps was written with Python 2 in mind, just be aware that you will need to either approach the vendor of that third-party add-on or potentially make some amendments in-house in order to make that Python 3 compliant at some future date when Splunk becomes purely Python 3. So next, Data Fabric Search. Now this is one, which tab do I have it on? So not this one, not this one, not this one. Naturally, it's on the last one. Okay, so Data Fabric Search is something that was mentioned first of all last year at conf19, and that was when it entered its initial beta. And it is effectively a way of federating searches out across either multiple Splunk instances. So say, for example, you're a large organization and you have a cluster in the EMEA region, a cluster in APAC, a cluster in America, for example. being able to then say, I want to run my search, but not only do I want to know about whether that data that I'm looking for is here, I want to know whether it is anywhere in my organization at all. Now, in addition to being able to search over Splunk clusters, you can also search over Spark, for example, and really accelerate the way that you look and gather and aggregate your data. So in one of the examples that they gave on the Data Fabric search, they ran side by side two searches. One was a traditional Splunk search over the data set that it had, and the other one was Data Fabric search. And Data Fabric search, bearing in mind that it does actually federate out the search jobs to Spark, so there is a small, I would call it initial delay before it starts returning results. But that would go out to Spark. Spark would then send out all of those jobs to all of the various indexes. And what we found was, when we watched the demo, is that the rate of return of search results and ultimately the number of search results coming back was considerably greater with Data Fabric search. It was able to go over far greater data sets and in far greater speed than anything previous in Splunk. One thing to be aware about it, Data Fabric search has a couple of different license scenarios around it. So basic Data Fabric search is just part of Splunk 8.0. However, if you want to scale it out considerably and potentially scale out your searches across hundreds, maybe even thousands of CPUs, then the licensing relates to the number of CPUs. We can provide more details on that if you're interested, and if you want actually a more specific demonstration on how Data Fabric search works, then that's something we can do at a different time as well. And next, data stream processor, which I think was, of course, it's that one. So data stream processor is an interesting new product. I'm actually quite excited about this one, if I'm honest. So traditionally, when you had data coming into Splunk, you would have something like a Splunk forwarder, or if you were feeling like living dangerously, you would send syslog directly into Splunk. But what you would have is that data coming in, being stored, processed, and all the rest of it, and sort of, I don't want to say evaluated on the way in, but all that would be done by your indexer. With the data stream processor, you effectively have a separate instance from your indexes. And as the UI shows here, no more do we need to go in and manually edit props and transforms, for example. We can very easily and very quickly, especially from common data sources, so for example, your AWS Kinesis and CloudTrail and so on and so forth, you can just use the UI and say, hey, I've got this data over here and I want it to come in here and I want to do this and I want to process it this way. And then once that's done, I want to send one copy of it to Splunk and I want to send another copy off to, for example, HDFS, because I want a technology agnostic copy somewhere. All of that data, that sort of data processing, you can do in a nice, simple UI. And additionally, what you can do with it as well is, for example, here we go, read from Kafka, normalize, write to Splunk. It's very much, I don't want to say Splunk's own version of NiFi, but if you're familiar with NiFi, it's kind of similar to that in terms of you making all your sort of processors and connecting them all, and ultimately writing your data into Splunk. But like I say, it makes that data onboarding process so much easier. And like I say, it's a very friendly, easy to use UI. Some additional features that it has as well is one of the questions that sometimes customers have asked me in the past has been, how do I get some sort of notification if maybe a data source that is, critical to my organization has stopped reporting. So, for example, say you've got data from a particular server that's really important, and the universal forwarder, for example, crashes, and then the data stops coming in. Well, what the data stream processor also does is it looks over and retrospectively understands what is normally flowing through these graphics, these sort of objects here that I've got on display. And you can set it up such that you say, well, if there is a deviation from what we consider to be normal, then I want to know about that, because that means potentially a data source has either suddenly started producing more data than we expect, and therefore why, or an important data source has stopped reporting in, so we need to investigate that as well. So it gives you that better control over not only how to bring the data in, but how is my data coming in, and how can I understand that flow of data, and what actions might I need to take if that flow changes into a way that I'm not familiar with or not happy with. So, other things. Right, natural language platform to do with using voice queries. So, for this one, I'm not going to demo it. What I'd say is, if you want to have a look at how this works, look at the day 2 keynote. It's basically a way of almost treating Splunk like, I'm going to say the white box because I can't say the word in here, or otherwise it will respond to me. But ALEXA. Splunk VR was a very interesting one as well. I had a go at this on the demo in the pavilion, and effectively it is a way, almost like what's the movie called, Minority Report, being able to create an environment with your dashboards and being able to immerse yourself in that environment and see and really understand what's going on. I'm not sure any of our customers at the moment yet would have a specific use case for it, but it is still an interesting thing. IT Service Intelligence 4.4. So along with this, and also Enterprise Security version 5 that was released, again, one of the main things is this migration to Python 3 versus Python 2. There are, of course, some additional performance enhancements and new analytics as well. What I'd also say is that both with ITSI and Enterprise Security, one of the things that Splunk as an organization are definitely looking to do is to effectively merge the functionality under the bonnet of those two products with the machine learning toolkit. So ideally sort of introducing machine learning out of the box by default. The things where we, for example, look for what is unusual in our environment. If we are looking for potential security threats, we can use machine learning now, because these, machine learning toolkit is included by default. So that is the direction that Splunk is moving in, and so expect more in the way of machine learning for the future. Splunk Business Flow. Now, this is another one that was introduced in Conf 2018. Again, another really interesting product. Now, for those who aren't familiar with it, the way I'll describe it is, for every transaction, say, for example, you are Amazon.com, and you've got your online presence, and that's where you do your sales. Your customers come to your website, they search for something, they add it to their basket, they go to their basket, they check out, and they pay. Now, that's a series of effectively a series of transactions. And, first one is can the customer get to the website? Does it load in a timely fashion? The next one is, when they search, do they actually get search results? Do they see products that they might be interested in? Then can they select a particular product? Does that product get added to the basket, and so on and so forth? And the idea with Splunk Business Flow is that you track each of those steps. So you as a business owner will understand critical steps that, in this case, using the Amazon example, are critical to ultimately revenue generation. And so using Splunk Business Flow, you can track what journey do users take. So for example, what percentage of our users that do come and do add something to their basket then go and actually check out and pay for it? And for those that don't, for those that add something to the basket and then don't buy it, what is different about them compared to those that do buy? And then get insights basically to, is there something which is stopping a customer making a purchase? And this is, giving the example here, predating Splunk Business Flow, Somerford did actually have a customer who had a use case very similar to this, whereby they had Splunk in and they had an online sales presence. And they started to, collect the logs from that and analyze how their online sales processes were working. And what we found was that all of those who were adding things to a basket and not yet, purchasing it, or I say all of them, a large majority of those that were adding things to a basket and not then subsequently purchasing had one thing in common, and that was that they were all running a very specific version of a browser. And it turns out that the website for this particular customer had some issues compatibility-wise with that particular browser, which meant that when the customer said, I want to buy this, and clicked the little button to buy it, nothing happened. And so, by understanding that, they were able to go, oh, goodness, right, okay, our own website is preventing sales. And to give you some insight, they look back at how many times has this particular browser come on and gone through the process, and what is the monetary value of the things that we potentially may have sold but didn't, and it mounted into the several millions. So that was a massive bit of insight, in terms of that's a huge amount of potentially lost revenue. They were able to push that fix out for the website in less than a day, and all of a sudden those users on that user agent, that particular browser, were actually able to make purchases. And so Splunk Business Flow is all about that sort of thing, about being able to identify that process of actions or interactions that someone has with your business, and being able to say, hang on, can we optimize this step or that step, or is something actually blocking us from doing business? So it's a very, very visual way of doing things. Makes you easy to understand customer journey effectively. It's something that we, as an organization, we can give you a sort of more in-depth demo if you're interested in that sort of thing. But it's, for me, I think it's one of the more interesting products to come out of Splunk in the last few years. Yeah. So additional stuff. So Viktor Ops. So Viktor Ops was something that Splunk acquired just over a year or so ago. Basically, it's designed to interact with Splunk and actually allow you to manage alerts and do those sort of response steps from a mobile device whilst on call. So, for example, limiting the requirements for you if something happens, server falls over, for example, being able to respond to that on call from a mobile device rather than having to go into the office and take action that way. So yeah, there's closer integrations with Viktor Ops. SignalFX was one of the acquisitions mentioned, looking at in correlation with, I suspect, future versions of ITSI, about being able to have real-time insight into, like it says here, cloud-native applications and environments. So, if you've got a service that you're running and you're using Docker and Kubernetes, for example, being able to understand in real time what's happening with that service, what's the overall health, and being able to alert when something is not quite as it should be. Splunk Investigate. So I have that here somewhere. Yep, here we go. That's the first one I picked correctly on the first time. There is a small demo here. I recommend you watch it. I'm not going to run it here because we're going to have the whole lag of me downloading a video to download it, to upload it to you. But you've got the URL here. I'd recommend going and watching it. What Splunk Investigate is from both IT ops, I guess, and security perspective, a way of collaboratively working on any issues that you have. So if anyone is familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, it's kind of similar to that in so much as you kind of have the the cells that you will run, you will do searches in, you will have potentially Markdown or other things. You can put comments in there, and the idea being that if you have a security team that is responsible for your global presence, then you might have people working in Australia, people working in the UK, people working in Canada, but they all need to have the same understanding of what is affecting the business globally. If there's, for example, talking about security incidents, but say, for example, there's a DDoS on your main company website. So how do we all go about understanding what's going on, who's done what, who's taking on what task? All of that sort of thing is what Splunk Investigate is all about. It's about putting things together, working collaboratively, always having that same single understanding of one common point of truth, effectively. So there is, like I say, a small demo here. I recommend going and having a watch of that and see what you see. And Enterprise Security, I mentioned already that version 5 was released. Again, it's definitely stepping more in the direction of the machine learning toolkit, which is now pre-packaged with it. One thing I would say is that just be aware that because of the size of the package now, because it now includes machine learning toolkit and the Python for scientific computing libraries, is that there are additional considerations when actually uploading to your search heads in terms of timeout and so on. And then finally, Splunk Mission Control. Again, very similar to Splunk Investigate, but Splunk Mission Control is effectively an idea of having a single dashboard for all things related to your security. So effectively, if you imagine a high-level abstraction of enterprise security, it's effectively that, having one view that allows you to just understand at a glance what is happening with your security perspective. It is quite early at the moment. You can click on this link here and just get some more information from Splunk Direct. But as I said, if you want to have a view, like what does it actually do, how to actually see it in action, is to go here on this Day 2 keynote. The Day 2 keynote, basically all of the things I've talked about, they will go through and they will actually show you it, working live, and perhaps they are braver persons than I for doing live demos. But that, like I say, is the main things to come out of Conf 2019. Yeah, that's it really. Like I say, any element of what we've shown today that you want a bit more detail on, or maybe you would like a demo or a workshop of some kind, then by all means do get in touch through our marketing team, and they will sort of arrange for us to put something together so that we can actually go through in a bit more detail for you. All right, thanks for your time.